Welcome to the Ironwood Gym. My last video focused on the posterior chain. It was entitled Train the Chain. Check it out if you haven't seen it yet. Focused on what the posterior chain was and why we need to train it. Today I want to focus a little bit more on how to do it. So I'm going to kind of go through what I do. Certainly this is not an exhaustive list. You may need to do things differently. You may find other lifters or coaches that train the posterior chain a little bit differently, more frequently, less frequently, whatever the case may be. I'm just going to give you some ideas. Hopefully, especially if you're new to lifting, just try to get you kind of pointed in the right direction, or new to setting up your own program, or whatever the case may be. I will also hit some things on working with athletes, maybe beginning athletes, just kind of, well, we'll kind of see where everything goes with this. So, just kind of work, I don't know if top to bottom is the right word, but maybe talk from the biggest things and then I'll work my way down. So, my go-to, which I have stated before in the past, that my go-to for training the posterior chain, the entire posterior chain, is going to be the RDL. And some people prefer a stiff leg deadlift over an RDL. That's fine. Not a big deal. But those would be my go-tos as far as getting the most bang for my buck out of an exercise. So I'm going to put in RDLs but behind my squat. So as a powerlifter, I'm going to squat first. That's going to be, for me, it's usually on Mondays. And then my RDLs are going to follow that, okay? They are a supplemental special exercise for the squat, and I get a lot out of them for my squat. So I'm going to do it right after I squat. The good mornings would also fit in that place. So I'm not always going to do RDLs. I may do RDLs for 3 to 4 weeks and then switch it up and do good mornings. And there are different variations of both. I'm just kind of speaking in general terms here, because obviously you can do RDLs with a close stance or with a wide stance. Stiff legs, you can do the same thing. Good mornings, there's many variations of good mornings that you can do. You know, you have your regular good morning, you have an extreme arch back good morning, you have good mornings off of pins or coming out of this out of safety chains. So chain suspended good mornings. Good mornings with a wide stance. There's different variations of these exercises. I'm just speaking in general terms. So if I squat first, then I will do either a RDL or a good morning variation second. Okay, so how would I pick my sets and reps for that exercise? For me, it's going to depend on where I'm at in my training. So in earlier blocks of training, that supplemental exercise, I don't focus as much on that. Okay, but in the middle blocks of training, I focus very heavily on that. So that kind of determines my sets. About 3 sets would be all I would do in a very early block of training, because I'm going to focus a lot more time on my assistance work, my smaller assistance work. When I get into those middle blocks of training, that's when I focus on my supplemental work, those supplemental exercises that are close in technique, that are going to really build up my main squat or my main deadlift. And you may not train using a block style, and that's okay. Some of this still applies, some of it doesn't. But as I go, so then I may be doing up to 5, 6, probably not 6, but sometimes I probably do 5 to 6 sets. I would say 4 to 6 sets when I'm really trying to hit those supplemental exercises very hard. When I get into my later blocks of training, I'm putting a lot more time, still probably getting around 4 sets, but I'm putting a lot more effort into my main exercise at that point. So my kind of back off things like RDLs just a little bit. Still train them hard, but maybe with not quite as much volume. So when I am trying to push these exercises, I'm doing 4, 5, maybe not very often, but maybe up to 6 sets of RDLs or good mornings, depending upon which one I have in at the time. What do my reps look like? You can certainly do higher reps. I tend to veer away from that with the good morning due to the nature of the lift. I think you can get yourself in more trouble, or trouble can happen quicker with a good morning since the bar is loaded on top of your spine. So the compressive forces combined with, if you start to lose your posture and you start to go into flexion, that can cause problems a lot quicker versus if the bar is in your hands. When you lose your posture, you can just drop the bar. Okay, that's coming more from a safety aspect, that I don't go really high reps with these. With the RDLs, certainly I can get up to 15 at times. I don't do that very often. With the good morning, I pretty much limit it to 10 reps or less. And for that reason, for the safety aspect, that as the set goes on and you become more fatigued, the chance of you losing your posture increases. And with athletes, with lifters are going to be better at, because that's what they do, they're going to be better at focusing and maintaining, being able to maintain posture. When it comes to working with athletes, you can demand focus all you want, but you're only going to get so much focus because that isn't what they do. They're doing it to assist their sport. A lot of athletes don't like to lift, okay? So they'll go in, they'll work hard for you, but understand that their focus is not the same as someone that is a lifter. So doing high reps and their body control in the weight room is not as good as a lifter, generally speaking. So the chance of them losing technique as the set goes on goes up. Okay, so for them, definitely I don't do, or I didn't really ever do more than sets of 10 in good mornings. And RDLs were similar, and then I wanted to keep the reps below 10, or 10 or below. Now, the other reason you would want your reps to be lower is because this is a bigger bang for your buck exercise, and you can get a lot more strength out of it. So, you're not going to gain as much strength doing sets of 10 as you are doing sets of 6 or 5s. So therefore, because I really feel, and I think a lot of lifters are on the same page, and coaches, that you can get a lot more from a strength perspective out of your RDLs and good mornings, and it would be better. You would be better served keeping those reps lighter, but heavy sets at those reps to get the most strength you can out of it. And I will get down to very heavy sets of 5 in both the good mornings and the RDLs or stiff leg. I really don't go below sets of 5 very often. Because of the precariousness of the lift. I feel that it's too, once you start to lose technique, you're not getting as much out of it and injury risk goes up. So with RDLs, it's really easy to start breaking down technically, whether it's postural, spinal posture, or whether it's that upper back, your traps, and lats losing posture more in your mid to upper back. So either one is taking away from the lift. And the same thing with good mornings. So with the good mornings, it's going to be more happen in the low back versus the upper back, but still that's something we want to get away from, because as that happens, the injury risk goes up. Now, with good mornings, you can, I don't think it's necessary, I think you can easier get to maybe some heavy triples. I wouldn't go all out 3-rep max triples, but definitely getting some heavier triples a little bit easier with the good mornings than with the RDLs. That's my personal opinion on that. Okay, but that's how basically I'm going to train that second exercise, the RDLs, stiff legs, good mornings. It's going to be, depending upon where I'm at, anywhere from 3 up to 5 or 6 sets, typically keeping the reps. And I do push these heavy sets, but keeping the reps generally from 5 to 10. Okay, so let's move on. Let's focus on the hamstrings now. The hamstrings, my go-to is the glute ham raise, right? I was once told that for the glute ham raise, you never want to do more than 6 reps per set, because the hamstrings are primarily a fast twitch muscle group. I followed that for a long time. The one thing with that is that as reps go up in the hamstrings, you can do more than 6 reps. It's fine. You can do more than 6, especially if you're a bodybuilder who's wanting to put mass on your hamstrings. But even for athletes or for powerlifters or strongmen or weightlifters, you can do more than 6 reps, especially if you're lacking in the hamstrings, glutes area. It would be a good idea to put some muscle mass on there so you have more to work with. But I also, going back to that idea of doing 6s, I also really like the idea of loading up your glute ham raises with a dumbbell. You grab a dumbbell, hold it on your chest. And when I'm talking about doing glute ham raises, I'm only talking about when you lower yourself, you are only lowering to parallel. You're not going down and doing that hyperextension or the back extension phase. I feel that leads to bad technique in the glute ham raise. So I always stop, and I coach the athletes that I worked with to always stop right at parallel, and then keep your hips locked in and only use your hamstrings to bring yourself up. Okay, so the only movement that you see is coming from knee flexion. This is another exercise that, depending upon where I'm at, would depict how many sets I'm doing. Earlier phases of training, because it's a building exercise, it's a developmental special exercise for the squat and the deadlift, I would be doing more sets, 3, 4, 5 sets per workout. As I go on and I'm getting closer, and the glute ham raise is such an important exercise, such a valuable exercise as far as increasing hamstring strength, that will benefit you when it comes to squatting, that I would probably keep my volume up for a lot longer period of time. But as I go on, as I'm getting closer to a competition or a test date, I probably would cut my volume back on that, and I wouldn't cut it out. I definitely would not cut the exercise out. It's an exercise I really don't like to cut out very often. Not that I never cut it out and replace it with something, but it is my absolute go-to, and I just kind of change what I'm doing with it. Sets and reps, resistance, isometrics, eccentrics, whatever, but it is going to be in the program a lot. Okay, it is the primary way that I build the hamstrings when it comes to speaking of a hamstring exercise. So it's going to be in there quite frequently, but if you can handle more weight, definitely handle more weight. Okay, grab a dumbbell, have someone hand you a dumbbell and hold it on your chest, but don't let technique break down. If you start breaking at the hips when you have a weight, you either need less weight or no weight. All right, it has to be done strictly to get the most out of it. Um, Moving on to the low back. Okay, how would I train the low and glute ham raise? I typically, just stepping back just a second, I will typically do that on my squat day, but it can be done twice a week. I typically just do it once, and I feel that that's enough stimulation for me, and I think that goes along with why I can keep it in the program for a longer period of time and continue to make progress with it. If I did it twice a week, I would probably stall out on progress and need to change it up. So that's how I do that. Okay, so moving on from the hamstrings, let's focus on the low back now. The low back it can be trained different ways. And if you saw, I had a short that I talked about the reverse hypers, the number one exercise for the low back. That could be debated. It is what I believe, but not everyone handles reverse hypers well. Okay, there are people that struggle and it actually causes them more pain to do reverse hypers. I think those individuals are kind of few and far in between, but they're definitely out there. So for them, the reverse hypers might not be an option, or they need to spend a lot of time developing the glutes and doing other low back work that will help to prepare their body to handle the reverse hyper better. Okay, so reverse hypers for me, I'm going to put them in on my deadlift day. And this is another one. You could certainly do it both days. I typically prefer to have it on my deadlift day, which falls on Friday. I will do it a little bit later in the workout because they're not quite as technical as some of the stuff that I do beforehand. So I move it back a little bit in the workout and generally train it from 10 to 15 reps, but going up to 20 certainly is an option. I really wouldn't get below 8 hardly ever, just due to what the needs of the low back. Higher reps tend to be a little bit better, but 10 to 15 is typically the range that I'm in most often. I do rotate reverse hypers in and out. I don't do them all the time. They are infrequently, but other exercises that you could do, definitely back extensions. If you want to get more out of your back extensions, and this is just the simple hyper extension as a lot of weightlifters call it, or a back raise where you're in a Roman chair and this is my legs, this is my body, and you're just coming to here. Okay. Now when I do these, I don't advocate the hyper extension where you're coming up above parallel. Don't do that. That is not a good thing for your back. Just come up to parallel and stop. Again, 10 to 15 reps per set, 2 to 3 sets per workout. Most likely, if you've been training for any amount of time at all, unless you're a very heavy lifter, you're going to need to add some resistance. Okay, you can do it with bands or dumbbells or plates. A lot of people will grab a weight and put it on their chest. I'm more of an advocate of putting it behind your head. That increases the distance from your hips to the weight, which makes it more difficult. Okay, and that's what I want out of it. I want it to be more difficult. That way, I'm getting more out of it strength-wise. And you could say, well, I can just grab more weight and hold it on my chest. That is true, but in my opinion, it still doesn't match holding a weight behind your head. Even though it's less weight than what you can hold on your chest, I feel you get more out of holding the weight behind your head. And again, 2 to 3 sets of 10 to 15 reps, and you can push the weight on that, try to get it up to where it's fairly heavy. Another great exercise is the back extension in row. I have a video of that. I believe I use the little and symbol, so back extension, little and symbol thing that you got going on there, and row. So do a search for that. You should be able to find it. Ironwood strength back extension and row. It is a very good exercise at training the low back isometrically. Okay, and I think that that goes a long way. Done in earlier phases of training, I think that that goes a long way for helping further gains in adding concentric strength as time goes on. Okay, my low back, and then the other thing I'll do a lot for low back is pull-throughs. Now, pull-throughs are kind of like RDLs in that they hit everything, but I do it a little bit more specifically using, you can use different stances, you can use stiff leg versus bent leg, but that's another one for me that I feel that really benefits my low back. Typically, I'll do pull-throughs on Monday at the end of my squat workout, and I do move it pretty much all the way to the end of the workout. 2 to 3 sets, 10 to 15, 20 reps per set. Okay, on Monday, that's for my low back, and then on Friday for my low back is when I'm going to be doing things more like reverse hypers, back extensions, things that target the low back a little bit more specifically. So the only thing we're really missing right now, off the top of my head, is the glutes. And I am definitely an outside the box thinker when it comes to how to train the glutes. I've tried a lot of the things that are out there, and I find that most of it are kind of gimmicky. I've tried the barbell hip thrusts, and I know all the praise that barbell hip thrusts get. I didn't feel like I got as much out of them. I felt the discomfort level wasn't worth what I was getting out of them, which was minimal. Okay, so I was putting myself in a lot of discomfort and barely getting anything out of it. If you go back about 10 to 12 years, okay, so this is 2024. If you're going back to 2012 or 2012 to 2014, I seem to remember the barbell hip thrust becoming all the rage in the powerlifting community. And these big time lifters were doing barbell hip thrusts with like 500 pounds, 600 pounds. Now no one talks about it. But now the fitness community has picked up on it, and now that's their big thing, is doing barbell hip thrusts. I think the reason it's no longer in the powerlifting community, or at least it's not talked about anymore, is that it's not nearly as effective as what people thought it was going to be. It's picked up in the fitness community as, in my mind, more of a gimmicky thing. This is the new fad. This is what's popular now, and so we have to do it. I choose not to. I don't think it's worth it. So, getting into what I wanted to get into was, how do I train the glutes? Understand that the glutes are hit in almost all posterior chain work. They're hitting RDLs, they're hitting good mornings, they're hitting reverse hypers, even in back extensions. Pretty much everything you do for your posterior chain is hitting your glutes. So I don't see a huge necessity to have a ton of glute work in the program. That doesn't mean I avoid it. It's just not a big point of emphasis to me when everything I do already hits the glutes. Okay, now I'm going to go on that just a little bit more. When you're doing reverse hypers, you should be thinking about squeezing your glutes as you kick that weight up. Okay, excuse me. Don't just try to make it all low back. You should be using your glutes along with that. The same thing with back extensions. When you're doing good mornings and RDLs, you want to focus, if you have your hips here, okay, and you go down, you lower the weight, you want to focus on rotating your hips, okay, to come back up. Don't just try to strain and use your low back to lift the weight. That's not how those exercises should be done. You should be rotating your hips and snapping your hips through as you come up, okay? That will get more of your hamstrings involved and more of your glutes involved. And that's how, and it will help improve hip function. If you don't intentionally try to use your glutes and use your hips, you will lose function in those areas. So we want to try to actually focus on utilizing the glutes and rotating those hips to bring yourself back up. Okay? So that's that. Now let's get into what I would actually do specifically for the glutes. I have one exercise, okay? And that is, and yes, there are other things out there, but there's one exercise that I want to bring up here. That's the dumbbell walking lunge. To me, it is one of the best glute exercises you can do, and it is very functional in that you're going through a movement pattern while you are utilizing your hips. So when you step and you drop your back leg, your weight should be on your front heel. And then you're going to pull yourself forward up, okay? So as you step down, come down as you bring that leg forward, now you're at your lowest position. Okay, then as you pull yourself forward with that lead leg, your glutes are actually going to be squeezing as they elevate your body and straighten out. Your leg is extending and your hip is extending at the same time. It would be better, instead of doing a lunge, step, 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 okay, it would be better to step all the way through. So as I step, my next step is going to go all the way through to the next step. I'm not going to bring my feet together and stop on every rep. That will force my glute to work harder all the way through to the next step, okay? But I just think the dumbbell walking lunges, done properly, done with good technique, are outstanding for your glutes and for glute development and building the glutes in a functional manner that will carry through, that you can utilize as you go into your squatting, as you go into your deadlifts, as you go into, if you're a sprinter, for sprinting. Okay, is it a direct carryover for sprinting? Probably not extremely direct, but I think it's going to be a lot better than doing some of these other exercises like all your glute bridges, and certainly there's a place for some of the bridges. I do like them for activation exercises, but as a training tool, I don't think you're getting a ton out of them that is going to carry over to actual performance. And that goes not just for sprinting, but for lifting as well. I think walking lunges, there's a lot more to be gained there. That pretty much concludes this episode. Again, that's how to train the posterior chain. If you saw my video on train the chain, you realize that I also think that the lats, the traps, are very important, as well as the triceps, even though the triceps definitely fall outside the train, or outside the chain. But I wanted to focus on what the common definition of the posterior chain is on this episode, and that is the hamstrings, the glutes, and the low back. I will have more come out later for training the rest of that, but right now, that'll be enough for this episode. So if you like what you're seeing, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share it with other coaches and lifters that you think can get something out of this. Definitely trying to get the word out there. And as always, be in the pursuit of strength.